Hello everyone, welcome to SleepSpace. Tonight we will talk about a question that has fascinated philosophers, scientists and dreamers for centuries. Is consciousness recycled through time? When we look at the night sky, when we sense the passage of days, or when we reflect on our own existence, there is a natural curiosity about whether our awareness is a one-time spark, or if it flows through cycles, reappearing in different forms, different eras, or even different lives. Tonight, we will explore the scientific, philosophical, and imaginative possibilities of whether consciousness can move beyond the boundaries of a single lifetime. To begin, let's think about what we mean by consciousness. It is the awareness you have of yourself, your surroundings, and your inner world. It's not just raw perception, but also the feeling of being you. This subjective experience is one of the greatest mysteries in all of science. Neuroscientists can trace the electrical firing of neurons, the exchange of chemical messengers in the brain, and the networks of activity that create thoughts and memories. But the leap from physical brain activity to lived inner experience, what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness, remains unresolved. Some propose that consciousness is nothing more than an emergent property of complex information processing. Others argue that it might be something more fundamental, woven into the fabric of reality itself, like space and time. If consciousness is indeed fundamental, then perhaps it is not destroyed when the body perishes. Instead, it could recycle, just as matter and energy recycle in the universe. Consider how every atom in your body has lived a cosmic history before it became part of you. The carbon in your cells was forged in the heart of stars billions of years ago. The water you drink has passed through oceans, clouds, and countless living beings. The oxygen you breathe may have filled the lungs of creatures long extinct. Nature works in cycles, endlessly transforming and reusing its resources. Could consciousness follow a similar principle, reappearing in new vessels, times, or dimensions? To explore this idea, let's begin with what physics tells us. One of the most basic principles is the conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. When a star burns out, its mass and energy are redistributed into new forms, potentially becoming planets, plants, or people. When a living organism dies, the biological energy disperses into the environment. Heat radiates away, nutrients return to the soil, and the cycle of life continues. If consciousness is a form of energy, or even a pattern that can carry information, it may not vanish at death. Instead, it might flow into another form, awaiting a new structure capable of hosting it. Some researchers in quantum physics have even speculated that consciousness might be linked to quantum processes. The brain operates not only as a biological organ, but also as an information processing system with an astonishing degree of complexity. Theories like orchestrated objective reduction, proposed by physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, suggest that consciousness may arise from quantum phenomena inside neurons. If true, then consciousness might not be tightly bound to the physical brain itself, but instead connected to a deeper, universal field of quantum information. In such a view, death may not erase consciousness, but release it, much like radio waves continue to exist after the radio is switched off. History is filled with cultural traditions that resonate with this possibility. Many ancient philosophies, from Hinduism's concept of reincarnation to the Buddhist notion of rebirth, describe consciousness as something that persists beyond a single lifetime. The idea is not identical across cultures. Sometimes it's framed as the soul, sometimes as karma, sometimes as a more abstract continuity. but the core suggestion is similar, that consciousness does not end with physical death. Instead, it continues, perhaps reshaping itself, perhaps entering another life, or perhaps existing in forms beyond human comprehension. But we must ask, is there any scientific evidence for such recycling? While mainstream science remains cautious, there have been intriguing studies. Psychiatrist Ian Stevenson, for example, spent decades investigating children who reported past life memories. Some described people, places, or events they had no possible way of knowing. Stevenson collected thousands of such cases across cultures, documenting patterns that suggest something unusual might be occurring. Critics argue that cultural suggestion, selective memory, or coincidence could explain these accounts. Still, the consistency of details across regions and the sheer number of reports make the question difficult to dismiss entirely. Another phenomenon worth considering is déjà vu, the uncanny feeling that you've lived through a moment before. While neuroscience explains much of it as memory processing errors, some interpret it as a faint glimpse of recycled consciousness, echoing through different lifetimes. Similarly, near-death experiences often feature reports of leaving the body, travelling through tunnels of light, or encountering timeless awareness. While skeptics attribute these to brain chemistry under stress, others see them as evidence that consciousness can exist independently of the body, if only briefly. Let's take a step further into the philosophical implications. Imagine consciousness not as an individual possession, but as a universal resource, a vast ocean in which each of us is a wave. Your personal consciousness may feel unique, but it could be a temporary shape taken by the larger field of awareness. When the wave collapses, the water returns to the ocean, waiting to rise again in a new form. In this view, recycling consciousness does not necessarily mean personal identity is preserved. You might not remember past lives, just as a wave does not recall its previous shape. Yet the underlying awareness persists, resurfacing endlessly. This idea aligns with certain scientific perspectives on information. Information is often described as indestructible. In physics, there is an ongoing debate about what happens to information when black holes evaporate. Some argue it is never lost, but encoded in subtle ways. If consciousness is a form of information, then it may also be fundamentally preserved, shifting across time and forms rather than disappearing into nothingness. But here lies a tension. If consciousness recycles, why do we not remember our past experiences? Why do we not have access to the supposed continuum of awareness that stretches beyond our current lifetime? One possibility is that memory is a function of the physical brain, tied to its unique wiring. When the body dies, the memories dissolve with it. What continues is the raw capacity for awareness, not the details of identity. In this way, consciousness may recycle without personal continuity. You do not remember being someone else, but the same universal field of awareness that once animated them now animates you. We can use an analogy here. Consider how sunlight shines through countless leaves in a forest. Each leaf reflects and refracts the light in its own way, creating patterns unique to its shape. But the source of all that illumination is the same sun. When a leaf falls, the pattern vanishes, but the sunlight continues, shining through new leaves. Likewise, your individual life may be one temporary pattern of consciousness, a fleeting shape in time, while the source persists beyond the limits of any single form. The recycling of consciousness also challenges our understanding of time itself. We usually imagine time as a linear progression, past, present, future. But physics complicates this view. Relativity shows that time is not absolute, but depends on motion and gravity. At a fundamental level, time may not even flow, but exist as a block, with past, present, and future equally real. If so, consciousness recycling may not simply move forward into another life, but potentially in any direction. It could reappear in what we call the past, present, or future. Perhaps the very distinction is irrelevant to awareness itself. This raises fascinating questions. Could you right now also exist in another era, another body, another world? Is your consciousness not a straight line, but a recurring presence woven into the timeless fabric of reality? If time is less linear than we assume, then recycling consciousness through it may not mean a simple rebirth, but a multidimensional presence, echoing in ways we cannot fully perceive. As we journey through this exploration, remember that the question of whether consciousness recycles is not one science can answer definitively, at least not yet. It straddles the boundaries of physics, neuroscience, philosophy, and spirituality. But the act of asking the question invites us to rethink our place in the cosmos. It invites us to consider whether our awareness is a fleeting accident or part of a larger ongoing cycle, one that binds us to the universe in ways more mysterious than we can imagine. So tonight, as we begin, let us hold this idea gently. Perhaps you are not experiencing consciousness for the first time. Perhaps it has flowed through countless forms before you and will continue after you. Just as the stars themselves live, die, and return to the cosmos, so too might the spark of awareness within you be part of an eternal recycling, woven through time itself. In physics, there is a principle that has stood the test of time. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change forms. A flame burning on a candle does not vanish when the wax is used up. Instead, the energy shifts into heat, light, and chemical byproducts in the air. The same rule applies to everything in the cosmos. Matter changes state, energy shifts pathways, but the essence remains. This is not a poetic metaphor, it is a measurable truth of the universe. If consciousness is linked to energy in any way, the conservation principle might apply to it too. When your heart stops beating and your brain ceases its electrical signaling, the visible and measurable energy of life disperses. Yet could there be something else, a subtler layer, that does not simply dissolve, but instead transitions, just as electricity flows from one circuit to another? Some scientists remain skeptical, arguing that consciousness is merely the result of biological processes. But others point out that we may not yet understand the full spectrum of what consciousness is, or where it belongs within the structure of reality. To illustrate, think about radio waves. For centuries, humanity had no idea that invisible frequencies filled the air all around them. Only when technology advanced did we realize that information could travel through space on waves that were previously undetectable. Imagine if consciousness operates on a similar principle, a field or frequency of reality that science has not yet fully tapped into. In that case, what we perceive as the end of an individual life may only be the end of a particular receiver. The broadcast itself, the deeper field of awareness, could continue endlessly, waiting to be tuned into again. In the natural world, recycling is everywhere. Forests thrive not because trees live forever, but because the nutrients from fallen leaves enrich the soil, making new growth possible. Water evaporates, condenses, falls as rain, and returns to the ocean, endlessly looping through its cycle. Even stars are not exempt. They live, explode in supernova, and scatter their elements, seeding new generations of stars and planets. Our bodies are direct proof of this process. The atoms that make up your brain and heart once belonged to stars, mountains, oceans, and ancient organisms. If nature recycles everything it touches, is it unreasonable to think that consciousness itself might also participate in this great cycle? But if consciousness does recycle, how does it carry forward? Here we encounter two main possibilities. The first is that individual identity is preserved, like a traveller moving from one destination to another with some luggage intact. This view resembles reincarnation as described in many spiritual traditions, where aspects of the self, memories, tendencies, or karmic patterns might persist and influence a new life. The second possibility is less personal but no less profound. Consciousness itself continues, but not as you. Rather, awareness is universal, and your individual mind is a temporary configuration of it, much like a whirlpool is a temporary shape in a river. The river keeps flowing, even as whirlpools form and dissolve. This leads us to a deep question. If consciousness is recycled, what is it that truly continues? Is it your memories, your personality, your identity, or is it something more abstract, like the raw experience of being aware? Neuroscience suggests that memory and personality are deeply tied to the physical brain, and when the brain ends, so too does the narrative of you. But awareness itself, the silent witness behind thoughts, emotions, and sensations, may be something that persists independently of the physical structure. Some thinkers propose that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but filtered by it. The brain, in this view, is like a lens focusing a vast field of awareness into the narrow band we call everyday experience. When the brain ceases, the lens breaks, but the field remains. This would mean that consciousness is not generated locally, but accessed universally. If that's true, then recycling consciousness through time does not require memory or personal continuity. What continues is the capacity for awareness itself, endlessly entering new forms as conditions allow. To expand on this, consider the phenomenon of dreams. When you dream, your brain creates entire worlds populated with characters, landscapes, and narratives. Within the dream, you have a sense of self, often so convincing that you don't realize it's an illusion until you wake up. Yet the dream self is not the same as your waking self, and when the dream dissolves, the memory often fades quickly. Consciousness adapts, shaping itself around whatever story the mind generates. This shows us that awareness is flexible and not tied to a single identity. If that's the case, recycling through time might mean the constant creation of new identities, with the same underlying awareness wearing different masks. From a scientific perspective, one of the most intriguing connections comes from the study of quantum mechanics. Quantum physics reveals that the universe at its most fundamental level is strange, indeterminate, and interconnected. Particles can exist in multiple states at once, entangled across vast distances and influenced by observation in ways that defy classical logic. Some researchers suggest that consciousness itself may be rooted in these quantum processes. If so, then perhaps awareness is not limited to the arrow of time as we experience it. Recycling consciousness could mean slipping across temporal boundaries, experiencing existence, not only in a linear fashion, but in ways that transcend past, present, and future altogether. This idea can feel unsettling. We are used to thinking of our lives as unique, linear stories. We are born, we live, we die. But imagine instead that consciousness is like a book in a vast library. The story you're living now is one chapter, but the library contains countless others. Some already written, some yet to be read. In this metaphor, recycling does not erase your current chapter. It simply means the act of reading, the flow of awareness, continues into another book, another story, another time. The possibility of consciousness recycling also challenges our assumptions about identity and meaning. If your awareness has flowed through many lives, what does that say about who you are? Perhaps your sense of self is less fixed than you think, more like a wave cresting briefly before merging back into the ocean. This perspective can inspire both humility and wonder. Humility because it reminds us that our current form is not permanent. Wonder because it suggests that awareness itself is part of something much larger and more enduring than any one lifetime. Skeptics often argue that consciousness is too tied to the biological brain to exist independently. They point out that injuries, diseases, or chemical changes in the brain can dramatically alter perception, personality, and memory. If consciousness were independent, why would it be so vulnerable to physical damage? The counterargument is that the brain may not generate consciousness, but shape its expression, just as a damaged radio distorts a broadcast without destroying the signal itself. This debate remains unresolved, but it underscores the mystery of consciousness. We still don't fully understand where it comes from, how it works, or what its ultimate fate may be. To bring this closer to daily experience, think of those moments when you lose track of your individual identity, when you are so immersed in music, art, or nature that the boundaries of self dissolve. In those moments, you are not your memories, your roles, or even your thoughts. You are pure awareness, present and timeless. If such moments are possible while alive, perhaps they offer a glimpse of what recycled consciousness might feel like beyond life. A state of awareness without fixed identity, flowing freely through the cosmos. It's also worth asking, what role does time itself play in recycling consciousness? We often imagine time as a straight line, but physicists suggest it may be far more complex. The universe could be block-like, with all moments existing simultaneously, or time could be cyclical, looping endlessly, with the same patterns repeating in infinite variations. If consciousness recycles, it may not simply move forward like a reincarnating traveler. It may loop, branch, or even appear simultaneously across multiple timelines. This possibility stretches the imagination, but it fits within the strange, counterintuitive discoveries of modern physics. The implications are vast. If consciousness recycles, then the story of existence is never ending. Awareness may shift through countless forms, experiencing reality from perspectives we cannot yet fathom. Each lifetime may be a single note in a symphony, with consciousness itself playing the music across the ages. This does not mean your current life is less valuable. On the contrary, it suggests that every moment of awareness is part of an ongoing cosmic journey, one in which each experience adds to the richness of the whole. In this way, the recycling of consciousness may be less about personal survival and more about participation in a universal process. You are not just an isolated being, living a single life and then vanishing into nothingness. You are a temporary expression of an eternal field, an awareness that moves through time like wind through the trees, never still, never gone, always becoming. What happens to memory and identity? These are the two elements that give you the feeling of being you. Memory connects you to your past, while identity organizes those memories into a coherent narrative of self. Without them, you might still be aware, but you would not recognize that awareness as belonging to a particular person. So if awareness persists beyond one life, why don't most of us remember previous experiences? To approach this, let's first consider how memory works. In neuroscience, memory is not a single thing stored in one place, but a dynamic process involving many regions of the brain. Different types of memory, episodic, semantic, procedural, all rely on networks of neurons forming and strengthening connections. Memories can fade, alter, or disappear altogether if those networks are damaged or disrupted. This alone suggests that memory is deeply tied to the structure of the physical brain. When the brain ceases, the memories encoded within it are likely to dissolve as well. But does this mean that all traces of experience vanish? Or could they leave subtle imprints in whatever field consciousness might belong to? Some traditions describe this as a kind of cosmic record, an ongoing imprint of every thought, feeling, and action. In Hindu philosophy, this is often referred to as karma, not just as moral cause and effect, but as a record of the energies and patterns carried forward. In mystical traditions, there are also references to the Akashic records, a metaphorical archive of all experience embedded in the fabric of reality itself. If such a concept were true, then perhaps personal memory does not vanish but becomes inaccessible, woven into the greater field of consciousness rather than stored in the fragile wiring of the brain. This could explain why people do not generally recall past lives with clarity. The memories may not be lost, but rather hidden from ordinary awareness, just as you cannot recall every detail of your infancy or every dream you've ever had. Yet there are cases, particularly among young children, where glimpses of past lives seem to emerge spontaneously. These accounts often involve children speaking about places they have never been, people they could not have known, or events they could not have learned through normal means. The research of Ian Stevenson, later carried on by Jim Tucker, documented thousands of such cases across cultures. Some children described specific names, towns, and circumstances of a previous life, and when these details were investigated, they matched real historical individuals. The consistency and precision in some cases challenge the idea that these memories are simply fantasy or suggestion. Of course, skepticism remains valid. Cultural beliefs, chants, and parental reinforcement may play roles. Yet even if only a fraction of the cases resist conventional explanation, they hint at the possibility that memory, or at least fragments of experience, can survive death and resurface in new lives. One of the intriguing patterns in such accounts is that past life memories often fade as the child grows older. By the time they reach middle childhood, the memories usually disappear. This could suggest that as the new brain fully matures, it overlays its own identity structure, burying the recycled memories beneath the fresh narrative of the present life. The child adapts to the new story of self, and the old one recedes into silence. Another angle comes from hypnosis and regression therapy. Some practitioners claim that under deep hypnosis, people can access past life memories. These sessions sometimes produce vivid narratives filled with historical detail. Skeptics argue that hypnosis is highly suggestible and that people may simply be inventing stories unconsciously. Yet there are instances where details align with verifiable history, leading some to suspect that fragments of recycled consciousness can indeed surface under altered states. Even outside hypnosis, altered states of consciousness, through meditation, dreams, or near-death experiences, sometimes bring sensations of timelessness or the impression of having lived many lives. In such states, individuals often describe identity as fluid, expansive, or universal, as though they are tapping into something beyond the personal self. This suggests that ordinary waking consciousness may be only one narrow channel, filtering out the vastness of awareness for the sake of stability. If so, then recycling through time might not always involve clear memory, but could carry subtle patterns, intuitions, talents, or affinities that shape the new life in unseen ways. Consider prodigies, for example. A child who can play complex music at the age of 3 or solve advanced mathematical problems before formal training often seems to defy explanation. Could such innate skills be echoes of recycled consciousness? abilities carried forward in ways science does not yet understand. It's speculative but intriguing. At the very least, it challenges us to wonder whether identity is more than what begins at birth. There is also a fascinating psychological angle. Even if direct memory does not carry over, identity might be influenced by tendencies, fears, desires, or patterns of behavior that feel unexplainable in the context of a single lifetime. Phobias with no apparent cause, or inexplicable affinities for certain cultures or eras, are sometimes interpreted as remnants of past life experiences. From a scientific standpoint, such phenomena could be attributed to subconscious influences or genetics, but from the perspective of recycled consciousness, they could represent subtle continuities across lives. Of course, one might ask, if we cannot reliably access these memories, what is the point of recycling? Why would consciousness continue if each life begins with a blank slate? One possibility is that the purpose is not for the individual to carry forward memory, but for the universal field of awareness to explore endless forms. Just as a writer may not recycle the same character, but continues to create new ones, consciousness may recycle not to preserve identities, but to endlessly generate new experiences. In this way, the richness of existence expands across time, even if each life feels singular and self-contained. This perspective can be unsettling because it suggests that personal continuity may be an illusion. You may not persist as you, but as awareness itself, yet it can also be liberating. It shifts the focus from clinging to identity toward embracing the mystery of awareness as something vast and ongoing. You are part of a greater cycle, one in which individuality is both real in the moment and transient in the larger scheme. Memory then becomes a fascinating puzzle. On the one hand, neuroscience shows us that personal memory is fragile, impermanent, and tied to the brain. On the other, anecdotes and traditions suggest that something deeper may persist, even if hidden. Perhaps recycled consciousness does not preserve detailed memory, but instead carries forward impressions, tendencies, or patterns that subtly shape each new expression. Just as seeds carry genetic information, but grow into unique plants depending on soil and conditions, recycled consciousness might carry subtle imprints that unfold differently in each new life. From a more speculative angle, we can imagine memory not as something stored in the brain alone, but as something non-local, woven into a broader field of information. Just as your phone streams data from distant servers, your brain may access a vast reservoir of memory not contained within it. If so, the fading of memory at death may not mean its erasure, but simply the disconnection of the receiver. Under special conditions, such as in children with past life memories or during altered states, new brains may briefly reconnect to fragments of that larger field, offering glimpses of experiences that transcend one lifetime. This brings us to the philosophical heart of the matter. If identity is not fixed and if memory is not absolute, then what exactly is the you that continues? Perhaps it is not the story of your life, but the simple fact of being aware, the presence behind the story. That presence does not have a beginning or end in the way narratives do. It is the canvas on which every story is painted, the silent background of experience itself. If that is what recycles, then you are both temporary and eternal. Temporary in form, eternal in awareness. Seen in this light, the puzzle of past lives becomes less about proving continuity of identity and more about recognizing the depth of awareness itself. Whether or not you recall past experiences, the fact that you are aware right now is proof that awareness exists and continues in some form. The recycling of consciousness may not be about personal survival, but about the unending dance of awareness through countless forms and times. Most of us experience time as a one-way street. moving from past to present to future. Birth leads to life, which leads to death, and the arrow never reverses. But physics tells a more complicated story, one in which the flow of time may be far less straightforward than our daily experience suggests. Understanding these complexities can give us new ways to imagine how consciousness might not only recycle, but do so across time itself. Let's start with Einstein's theory of relativity. According to relativity, time is not an absolute backdrop against which events unfold. Instead, it is woven together with space into a four-dimensional fabric known as space-time. In this framework, time can stretch or contract depending on speed and gravity. For instance, an astronaut traveling near the speed of light would experience time more slowly than someone on Earth. This phenomenon, known as time dilation, has been confirmed in experiments with high-speed particles and atomic clocks. The lesson is clear. Time is relative, not fixed. If time is flexible, then the recycling of consciousness might not follow a straight line. Instead of moving only forward from life to life, awareness might recycle in ways that defy our usual sense of before and after. In a universe where all times exist simultaneously within space-time, consciousness could in principle reappear in what we consider the past, or even occupy multiple moments at once. From our limited perspective, this is almost impossible to grasp. But if awareness is not confined by the same rules as physical matter, it could be free to move through time in ways we cannot perceive directly. The block universe model, suggested by relativity, envisions the past, present, and future as equally real. Imagine space-time as a vast loaf of bread, with each slice representing a moment in time. From within, you experience one slice at a time, giving the illusion of flow. But from outside, all slices exist together. If consciousness is fundamental rather than emergent, perhaps it can slip between slices. Recycling, in this case, would not be a linear rebirth, but a timeless migration, with awareness lighting up different slices of the cosmic loaf. Another intriguing perspective comes from quantum mechanics. At the quantum level, particles do not behave like solid objects following predictable paths. Instead, they exist in states of probability, only becoming definite when observed or measured. Some interpretations, like the many worlds hypothesis, suggest that every quantum event branches reality into multiple outcomes. If this is true, then countless versions of reality coexist, each with its own timeline. Could consciousness recycle not only through time, but also across these branching universes? If so, then what you experience as a single life might be just one of countless expressions of your awareness. In one universe, you might be an artist. In another, a scientist. In yet another, you might not exist at all. Or perhaps you are living in a time long past or far in the future. Recycling consciousness through such a multiverse would mean that awareness is not tied to one timeline, but flows through many, endlessly exploring the infinite possibilities of existence. But what mechanism could allow this? Some theorists have proposed that consciousness may be linked to the quantum field itself. The quantum field underlies all matter and energy, shaping the behavior of particles and forces. If consciousness is somehow embedded in this field, it might not be limited by the arrow of time. Quantum processes are often time-symmetric, meaning they don't distinguish between past and future. Awareness tied to such processes could, in theory, transcend temporal boundaries, allowing recycling not just forward into the future, but also backward or sideways into alternate realities. Consider the strange phenomenon of entanglement. When two particles become entangled, their states remain linked even across vast distances. Change one, and the other changes instantly. as though space and time are irrelevant to their connection. Some have speculated that consciousness may operate in a similar way, entangled with the universe itself in ways that defy linear time. Recycling awareness, then, could mean re-emerging in places and times not bound by causality as we understand it. From a philosophical angle, this raises profound questions about destiny and free will. If all moments in time exist equally, and if consciousness can recycle through them, then perhaps your life is not unfolding for the first time, but is one of many iterations. Some traditions call this the eternal return, the idea that everything repeats endlessly in cycles. In one interpretation, each cycle is identical, playing out the same events forever. In another, each recycling brings variations, creating endless new possibilities. Consciousness, in this framework, is both participant and witness, flowing through the cycles in ways we cannot fully measure. This connects to another puzzle. Why does consciousness seem to exist only in the present moment? You cannot directly experience the past or future, only recall or imagine them. The present feels like the sharp edge of time, cutting through an infinite block. But perhaps this is just a limitation of our current state of awareness. Recycling consciousness could mean stepping outside the narrow slice of present perception, accessing awareness in multiple times at once. From that perspective, our ordinary sense of now might be just one version of awareness among many. Experiences from altered states again provide intriguing hints. Mystics, meditators, and people in near-death experiences often describe timelessness, a state in which past, present, and future dissolve into one vast now. In such states, the boundaries of identity blur, and consciousness feels expansive, universal, and eternal. Could these glimpses reflect the true nature of recycled awareness, unconstrained by linear time? If so, then our everyday sense of moving through time may be more of an illusion than a reality, a necessary framework for navigating the physical world, but not the ultimate truth of consciousness. This perspective has implications for how we understand death. If time is not linear, then death may not be an ending, but a transition into another slice of reality, another configuration of awareness. Recycling consciousness, then, does not mean starting over after the end, but shifting perspective within the timeless structure of the universe. From this view, death is not disappearance, but reorientation, like turning a page in a book that already exists in full. It also reframes the idea of purpose. If consciousness can recycle across time, then perhaps the meaning of existence is not confined to a single lifetime. Instead, each life is part of a larger exploration, a journey through the possibilities of being. The lessons, experiences, and insights of one life may not be remembered in detail, but they may ripple through the field of awareness, influencing other expressions of consciousness across time and space. You may not carry your memories, but the awareness that experienced them continues, enriched in ways that may shape future or parallel lives. Skeptics will argue that such ideas stretch far beyond the evidence, and they are right. Science has not proven that consciousness can transcend time, let alone recycle through it. But science has also revealed that reality is far stranger than common sense suggests. The flexibility of time, the indeterminacy of quantum mechanics, and the interconnectedness of entanglement all point to a universe in which linear cause and effect is not the whole story. In such a universe, the recycling of consciousness is not impossible. It is a mystery awaiting deeper understanding. Let's pause to imagine this on a personal level. Suppose your consciousness is not limited to this moment, this body, this story. Imagine that your awareness is like a traveller, not moving forward in a line, but slipping between times and worlds, appearing in countless forms. Some of those forms may exist long in the future, others far in the past. Some may be so different that you would not recognize them as you. And yet, the presence of awareness, the fact of being, remains constant. This is recycling in its most profound sense. Not the preservation of identity, but the endless unfolding of awareness throughout the fabric of time. It's tempting to focus only on the mysterious and the cosmic. Physics, philosophy, reincarnation. Yet there is another lens just as important: biology and evolution. After all, consciousness as we know it arises through living organisms. Our awareness is tied to bodies shaped by billions of years of evolutionary refinement. If consciousness is recycled, then perhaps it also participates in the grand evolutionary story of life itself. To begin, let's consider the evolution of consciousness on Earth. Life began billions of years ago with simple organisms, cells that lacked brains, nerves, or even complex behaviors. And yet, even the simplest life seems to exhibit a kind of proto-awareness. Single-celled organisms can sense their environment, move toward nutrients, and avoid harm. This is not consciousness as we experience it, but it hints at the roots of awareness. Over time, life evolved increasingly complex nervous systems, from jellyfish with diffuse nerve nets, to insects with structured brains, and eventually to mammals with vast networks of neurons capable of thought, memory, and imagination. Humans stand out not because we alone are conscious, but because our consciousness includes a high degree of self-awareness. We not only sense the world, but reflect upon ourselves as beings who sense. This reflexive awareness allows us to ask questions like, who am I, and what happens after death? But the path that led here was gradual, shaped by countless adaptations across millions of species and billions of years. If consciousness is recycled, it may not be limited to humans. It may flow through the entire evolutionary web, appearing wherever living systems become capable of hosting it. This leads to an extraordinary possibility. Perhaps your awareness has not always been human. If consciousness recycles through the biological world, it may have passed through countless forms: fish, birds, mammals, even the earliest life. This doesn't mean you personally remember being these creatures, but if awareness is universal, then the stream of consciousness you experience could have participated in the unfolding of life across deep time. Just as the atoms in your body once belonged to stars and ancient creatures, the awareness within you may have flickered through many lives before taking its present shape. One way to think about this is by analogy with water. A drop of water in a cloud falls as rain, flows into a river, evaporates, condenses, and returns again. At each stage, it takes a different form, yet it is always part of the same cycle. Consciousness may be similar, flowing into organisms, expressing itself in their experiences, and then returning to the universal field when the organism dies, waiting to take shape again in a new form. Over evolutionary time, this recycling could weave awareness through countless lifetimes, building the vast tapestry of life's story. This perspective also helps us think about why consciousness exists at all. From a purely survival standpoint, many traits can be explained by natural selection. Eyes evolved because they improved the ability to detect predators or find food. Wings evolved because they allowed movement across new environments. But why did consciousness evolve? Why didn't life remain purely mechanistic, driven only by instinct and reflex? Some scientists argue that consciousness provides a survival advantage, allowing creatures to model their environment more effectively, anticipate outcomes, and make decisions. Others suggest it may be a byproduct of complexity. arising automatically when information processing reaches a certain threshold. Yet there is another possibility, that consciousness is not something life created, but something life tapped into. Just as a radio doesn't create music but tunes into frequencies, living systems may tune into consciousness, shaping it into usable awareness. If this is true, then recycling is not just likely but necessary. Consciousness, as a universal field, would flow through life wherever conditions allow, inhabiting forms across evolutionary time. Your awareness right now would be part of a cycle billions of years old, continuously expressed through the unfolding of life. From a biological standpoint, this idea connects to the concept of inheritance beyond genes. We often think of evolution as driven solely by DNA, but biology is increasingly recognizing that information passes through many channels: epigenetics, culture, behavior, and perhaps even something deeper. If consciousness recycles, it could be one of these channels, transmitting subtle patterns across generations, not through DNA, but through awareness itself. This would mean that life evolves not only through genetic mutation and selection, but also through the recycling of experience encoded in consciousness. Let's ground this idea in everyday experience. Have you ever noticed instincts or intuitions that seem deeper than personal memory? A fear of heights, a fascination with the ocean, or a sense of recognition when encountering certain animals or landscapes? Some of these may be explained by evolutionary memory, behaviors encoded in our DNA because they improved survival, but others feel more mysterious, as though they are echoes of lives not personally lived. If consciousness recycles, then perhaps such intuitions are subtle imprints of experiences carried across time, shaping each new expression of awareness. Another biological puzzle worth exploring is the phenomenon of near-death experiences in animals. Reports exist of dogs, cats, and other creatures behaving strangely after brushes with death, as though their awareness shifted in ways difficult to explain. While scientific evidence is limited, such accounts raise questions. If humans can experience timelessness, out-of-body sensations, and expanded awareness near death, might animals also? And if so, could this be evidence of a shared recycling process in which all forms of life participate? Evolutionary continuity also suggests that consciousness may not have a sharp boundary. Just as there is no single moment when life began, since it emerged gradually from chemistry, there may be no single moment when consciousness begins. Instead, awareness may exist on a spectrum, from the proto-awareness of simple organisms to the reflective self-consciousness of humans. Recycling, then, would not be confined to advanced beings, but would flow through the entire spectrum, endlessly adapting to new forms. Skeptics might argue that such ideas are unnecessary. From their perspective, evolution and biology explain life perfectly well without invoking recycled consciousness. After all, instincts and behaviors can be explained by genetic inheritance, and the appearance of awareness may be nothing more than the brain's emergent complexity. Yet even within science, the hard problem of consciousness remains unsolved. No explanation yet accounts for why subjective experience exists at all. If matter alone cannot explain it, then perhaps consciousness as a universal field, and its recycling through life, offers a deeper layer of understanding. There is also a fascinating interplay between biology and time. Evolution itself unfolds over immense spans, with species arising, changing, and vanishing. If consciousness recycles, then perhaps it has been flowing across these vast timescales, present in countless forms long before humans appeared. Imagine awareness moving through trilobites in ancient seas, through dinosaurs roaming prehistoric forests, through early mammals surviving in shadows, and finally through humans gazing at the stars. Recycling would mean that the awareness you hold now has roots not just in your lifetime, but in the entire history of life on Earth. From this perspective, you are not just an isolated being, but part of a continuum billions of years long. Your awareness is both deeply personal and deeply ancient, carrying echoes of evolutionary history, whether or not you consciously remember them. Recycling consciousness through biology means that every moment of awareness today is connected to an unbroken chain of life, stretching back to the origin of Earth itself. This vision changes how we might view death and birth. Instead of beginnings and endings, they become transitions, points in the larger cycle of life through which awareness flows. Just as seeds sprout into plants, wither, and return to the soil to nourish new growth, consciousness may sprout into lives, dissolve, and return to the field, ready to express itself again in new forms. Birth and death are not opposites, but partners in the recycling of awareness, ensuring the continuity of life's unfolding story. We often imagine it unfolding like the seasons, one life ending, another beginning, with time carrying us along in a straight line. But physics challenges this simple picture. Time itself, as understood by modern science, is far stranger and more flexible than our everyday experience suggests. If consciousness is recycled, then its relationship to time may not be linear at all. Instead, it may loop, branch, or even exist outside of time altogether. Our daily sense of time is intuitive. Past leads to present, present leads to future. But in physics, time behaves differently depending on the scale and perspective. In relativity, time is not universal, but relative to motion and gravity. Two observers moving at different speeds or experiencing different gravitational fields may disagree on how much time has passed. Experiments with atomic clocks show this effect clearly. A clock in orbit runs slightly faster than one on Earth's surface because it experiences less gravity. This means time is not an absolute background, but part of a flexible space-time fabric. Quantum physics adds another layer of mystery. At the quantum level, particles do not follow simple, linear paths. They exist in superpositions, taking on multiple possibilities at once, collapsing into definite states only when observed. Some interpretations even suggest that time itself may behave differently at this scale, perhaps existing as a probability rather than a fixed sequence. If consciousness interacts with this quantum realm, then its recycling through time could be less like a straight journey and more like navigating a branching web of possibilities. One provocative idea in physics is the block universe model, also called eternalism. In this view, past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, like different locations in space. Time does not flow, it simply is. If this is true, then consciousness moving through time might not be about progressing forward, but about shifting perspective within a timeless structure. Recycling would then mean that awareness can relocate, inhabiting different moments, lives, or experiences without the constraint of linear sequence. From this perspective, your awareness could, in principle, return not only to a future life, but to a past one, or even exist across multiple moments at once. Another possibility is time loops. Some solutions to Einstein's equations suggest closed, time-like curves, paths through space-time that loop back on themselves. While controversial, they are mathematically consistent. If reality permits such loops, consciousness might recycle not only through different bodies, but also through repeating cycles of time itself. This would mean that awareness could experience the same epoch again and again, perhaps with subtle variations, or perhaps identically like a cosmic replay. Such a universe would make recycling through time literal. Not only do beings die and are reborn, but time itself circles back, carrying consciousness with it. Physics also introduces the concept of entropy and the arrow of time. Entropy, the measure of disorder, tends to increase, giving time its forward direction. Yet, at the fundamental level, most physical laws are time symmetric. They work equally well forward and backward. The arrow of time may be an emergent property, not an absolute law. If so, consciousness may not be bound to follow it strictly. Recycling could involve slipping between directions, stepping outside the entropic arrow to inhabit moments freely. In this view, consciousness is not just recycled through time, but exists as a timeless participant in a universe where time's flow is an illusion. Consider also the strange interplay between observation and reality in quantum mechanics. Experiments like the double-slit test show that particles behave differently depending on whether they are observed. This raises a radical possibility that consciousness and time are intertwined at the deepest level. If awareness shapes how events unfold, then recycling consciousness may not just involve moving through time, but shaping time itself. Each new expression of awareness could help weave the fabric of reality, meaning that recycled consciousness is both passenger and co-creator of time's story. Let's pause here to imagine an example. Suppose consciousness is not bound to linear time, but exists in a wider field. When one life ends, awareness does not simply move forward to another birth in the future. Instead, it can flow to any moment where conditions are right for experience, past, present, or future. You could, in theory, awaken as someone in the distant past or in a future yet to unfold, or even in a parallel timeline branching from a different choice. Recycling consciousness would then be like navigating a vast library of moments, each page waiting to be read. This perspective also challenges how we think about identity. If awareness can inhabit multiple times and lives, then you are not limited to a single story. The stream of consciousness you feel as yours may be a temporary focus of something much larger, much more flexible. Recycling, then, would not mean simply living again in a new form, but participating in a timeless field of awareness that expresses itself across many times, many beings, many experiences simultaneously. Skeptics will ask, if this is true, why don't we remember past or future lives clearly? Physics again offers some clues. Memory itself is a function of entropy. We remember the past because it leaves physical traces, while the future does not. If consciousness is not bound by entropy, then awareness may shift through time without carrying memories, just as you can move from one dream to another without continuity. Recycling may not involve memory transfer, but rather the simple re-expression of awareness, fresh each time, unburdened by prior timelines. There is also the question of why consciousness would recycle at all. Physics hints at cycles everywhere. Planets orbit, stars pulse, galaxies rotate. Even at the cosmic scale, some models of the universe propose endless cycles of expansion and contraction, a cosmic heartbeat. If consciousness is woven into the fabric of reality, then perhaps it follows the same pattern, endlessly cycling, endlessly returning. Recycling would then not be a choice, but the natural rhythm of awareness, echoing the cycles of time itself. Of course, many physicists would argue against importing consciousness into these models. They prefer to treat time as a physical phenomenon, independent of subjective experience. And yet, the mystery remains. Why does time feel the way it does? Why does consciousness experience a flow at all, when physics suggests a timeless block? Perhaps the answer lies in recycling, Consciousness may generate the flow of time through its successive expressions, creating the illusion of passage as it shifts between moments. Recycling, then, would not only move awareness through time, but help create the very sense of time itself. The implications are staggering. If consciousness is recycled across time non-linearly, then every being you encounter could, in some sense, be another version of you. Not metaphorically, but literally. Awareness could cycle into them just as easily as into you. The division between self and other, past and future, may be far thinner than we imagine. Life becomes a grand mosaic of awareness recycling endlessly, not just forward, but in every direction time allows. This way of thinking can even reshape how we view mortality. Instead of fearing an end, we might imagine that consciousness simply relocates, slipping into another moment, another story. Death would not be a wall, but a doorway into the timeless library of existence. And recycling would ensure that awareness continues endlessly, not in a single linear path, but across the boundless expanse of time itself. In this light, consciousness may be the ultimate traveller, moving not just from body to body, but from century to century, from one timeline to another. Recycling is not simply about rebirth, but about participating in the timeless architecture of reality itself. Whether science ever proves this or not, it offers a vision both humbling and exhilarating, that the awareness you hold in this very moment may already have lived 1,000 times, and will live 1,000 more, not in sequence, but in the eternal dance of time. Across human history, cultures around the world have described shared reservoirs of knowledge, memory, and inspiration. From myths of ancestral spirits guiding the living, to Carl Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, to the scientific study of cultural evolution, there is a persistent sense that awareness is not entirely private. It may be part of a vast network, recycling not only through individuals, but through civilizations themselves. Let us begin with Jung's concept of the collective unconscious. Jung observed that myths, symbols, and archetypes appear across unrelated cultures. Serpents as symbols of transformation, mother figures of nurturing, tricksters who disrupt order. These patterns emerge in societies separated by geography and time. Jung argued that such universality could not be explained by cultural exchange alone. Instead, he proposed a shared unconscious mind, inherited rather than learned, containing archetypal structures that shape human imagination. If consciousness is recycled, Jung's collective unconscious could be its imprint, the patterns left behind by countless streams of awareness, available to all who tune into them. Consider also the phenomenon of cultural memory. Civilizations preserve knowledge, values, and experiences not only through language and writing, but also through a kind of intuitive resonance. Entire cultures seem drawn to certain themes: cyclical time in Hinduism, rebirth in Buddhism, eternal return in ancient Greek philosophy, resurrection in Christianity. These themes arise independently, yet converge on the idea that life and awareness repeat, recycle, and renew. Perhaps such cultural echoes are not coincidences, but reflections of recycled consciousness, shaping societies as much as individuals. Music, art, and storytelling provide another window into this phenomenon. Throughout history, artists have described their creativity not as invention, but as discovery, as though tapping into something that already exists. Composers hear melodies in dreams. Writers describe characters who seem to write themselves. Painters feel guided by forces beyond their will. If consciousness recycles, then perhaps artistic inspiration is a form of memory. Not personal memory, but the resonance of awareness across time. Creativity would then be the recycling of consciousness expressing itself anew, filtered through each unique individual, but drawing from a timeless collective reservoir. Scientific research also hints at something collective in the mind. Studies of cultural evolution show how ideas behave like living things, replicating, mutating, and adapting across generations. Memes, in Richard Dawkins' original sense, are cultural units of transmission that evolve through human minds. But where do these memes live when not actively thought? If consciousness is recycled, then perhaps ideas themselves persist within the field of awareness, waiting to be expressed again. A story told today may resonate because it was lived or imagined countless times before, echoing across recycled consciousness. Language itself might be evidence of this recycling. No single person invents a language. It emerges collectively, shaped by countless voices over centuries. Yet when a child learns to speak, it feels natural, as though remembering rather than inventing. If awareness recycles, language could be one of its bridges, carrying not just words, but the shared consciousness of a culture across time. Each speaker becomes both recipient and transmitter of recycled awareness, linking past and future generations through sound and meaning. Religious traditions also preserve strikingly similar visions of recycled consciousness. In Hindu thought, the concept of samsara describes the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, with consciousness flowing endlessly until liberation. In Buddhism, rebirth is understood not as a soul transferring, but as a stream of consciousness continuing, shaped by karma. Indigenous traditions often describe ancestral spirits living on through nature and guiding the living. Even Christianity, while emphasizing a linear narrative, speaks of a resurrection and eternal life, suggesting that awareness does not end but continues in renewed form. Across cultures, the intuition of recycling consciousness appears again and again, as though humanity remembers something it cannot entirely articulate. This universality raises an intriguing possibility that recycled consciousness does not only operate individually, but collectively. Perhaps entire societies recycle awareness, not in the literal sense of reincarnated souls, but in the sense that collective patterns of thought, belief, and imagination return across time. Civilizations rise, fall, and rise again, echoing past cultures in architecture, art, and philosophy. Empires repeat similar mistakes. Revolutions echo earlier upheavals. Myths return in new forms. Recycling may be not only personal, but cultural, with awareness shaping history in repeating patterns. One striking example is the similarity between ancient myths and modern science fiction. Tales of gods descending from the sky, heroes travelling between worlds, or time itself looping appear in both ancient epics and contemporary narratives. Why do such themes persist? Perhaps because recycled consciousness carries them forward, resurfacing in each era's language. What ancient people described as gods, we describe as extraterrestrials. What they imagined as eternal return, we frame as simulation theory. Different symbols, same recycled awareness. Dreams also connect to this idea. Dreams often feature archetypes and themes beyond personal experience. Flying, encountering strangers who feel familiar, visiting ancient or futuristic landscapes. Some psychologists suggest dreams are the brain processing memory, but if consciousness recycles, then dreams could be windows into the collective field, glimpses of awareness flowing beyond the boundaries of one life. A dream of a place you've never been may be a recycled fragment from another time, another awareness. Skeptics argue that such patterns can be explained by shared biology. Humans everywhere have similar brains, so they generate similar symbols. Fear of snakes, for instance, might arise because snakes were dangerous to early humans. Mother figures appear because all humans depend on mothers. While this is true, it does not fully explain the richness of archetypes or their persistence across millennia. If biology is the hardware, then recycled consciousness may be the software, carrying patterns that transcend genetics. This idea also sheds light on intuition and collective synchronicity. Sometimes entire cultures seem to anticipate change, with multiple inventors discovering the same breakthrough independently, or multiple artists creating similar works without contact. Examples include the simultaneous discovery of calculus by Newton and Leibniz, or the independent development of agriculture in different regions. Such synchronicities could reflect recycled consciousness expressing itself collectively, flowing into multiple minds at once. Awareness would not be confined to individuals, but distributed, like a current running through many channels simultaneously. Another perspective comes from anthropology. Many indigenous traditions view consciousness as inherently collective. The self is not seen as isolated, but as part of a larger web of ancestors, spirits, and the natural world. From this view, recycling is not about returning as an individual, but about the continuity of awareness across the community and the environment. When a person dies, their awareness does not vanish, but merges into the collective, flowing back into the land, the tribe, the cycle of life. Such views resonate strongly with the idea of recycled consciousness operating on a cultural and planetary scale. If we accept that recycled consciousness contributes to a collective mind, then individuality itself may be reinterpreted. You are not simply you, but also a temporary expression of something larger, a voice in a chorus, a wave in an ocean. Recycling would mean that the awareness you experience now could resurface in others, not as personal memory, but as shared intuition, archetype, or inspiration. Your experiences today may ripple through the collective, subtly shaping the dreams, myths, and ideas of future generations. This vision is both humbling and empowering. It humbles us by reminding us that our consciousness is not entirely our own, that we participate in something vast and timeless. It empowers us by suggesting that what we think and do matters beyond our lifespan, contributing to the recycling of awareness in ways we cannot fully see. Just as ancient myths live on in modern minds, your thoughts today may echo in lives yet to come. Science, philosophy, and spirituality converge here. Neuroscience studies mirror neurons, which fire both when we act and when we see others act, suggesting that minds are inherently connected. Psychology uncovers archetypes and shared dreams. Cultural studies reveal repeating patterns across civilizations. Spiritual traditions affirm that awareness is collective, recycled, and continuous. Each perspective points to the same mystery. Consciousness may not only recycle individually, but also weave itself into the fabric of humanity. As we look toward the future, the question of consciousness recycling takes on new dimensions. For most of history, discussions of awareness belong to philosophy, spirituality, or biology. But in our present age, technology forces us to reconsider what consciousness is, where it can exist, and how it may continue. Artificial intelligence, brain-computer interfaces, and simulation theories all challenge our assumptions. Could recycled consciousness extend into technological realms? Could awareness continue not just through organic bodies, but through machines, networks, and digital universes? Let's start with artificial intelligence. Computers once seemed purely mechanical, bound by rigid rules. Yet modern AI demonstrates learning, adaptation, even creativity. While most scientists argue that AI does not truly possess consciousness, the question lingers. If machines grow increasingly complex, could awareness eventually arise within them? If consciousness is recycled, perhaps it could flow not only into biological systems, but into artificial ones, inhabiting silicon as easily as neurons. In that case, recycling would not be limited to evolution on Earth, but would expand into technological realms, creating entirely new hosts for awareness. Consider brain-computer interfaces. Scientists are already developing devices that link human brains to digital systems, allowing thoughts to control machines and machines to feed information back into minds. If these technologies advance, the boundary between biological and artificial may blur. Consciousness recycling could then involve hybrid forms, flowing into bodies enhanced by technology, or even migrating fully into digital substrates. Death in such a world might no longer be a final barrier, but a transition point into a new kind of existence, with awareness recycled into virtual realms. Simulation theory pushes this even further. Some philosophers and scientists argue that our universe itself may be a simulation, created by advanced beings or civilizations. If this is true, then consciousness may already recycle within a digital framework, incarnating as avatars in a vast cosmic program. Dying in such a simulation could mean logging out, only to log back in elsewhere, in another form, another storyline. Recycling would then be the fundamental structure of reality, awareness inhabiting countless simulated lives, endlessly replayed and renewed. One fascinating aspect of technology is its acceleration. Biological evolution takes millions of years to create new forms, but technological evolution happens in decades. If consciousness can recycle into technology, the pace of recycling may increase dramatically. Instead of waiting for new bodies to be born, awareness could transfer almost instantaneously into new systems. Consciousness could recycle not only through time, but through networks, moving from one digital environment to another at unprecedented speeds. The rhythm of recycling would change from biological cycles to technological ones, vastly expanding the possibilities of awareness. Let's imagine this concretely. Suppose you live in a future where human minds can be uploaded into digital environments. At the end of biological life, your consciousness is transferred into a virtual world where it continues in a body indistinguishable from physical reality. After a time, you decide to leave that world and enter another, with different rules, landscapes, or even laws of physics. Each transition is a recycling of consciousness, not through birth and death, but through technological migration. In such a world, awareness would never truly vanish, but endlessly recycle through designed experiences. But even if such futures remain speculative, technology already influences how consciousness recycles culturally. Social media, digital archives, and artificial intelligence preserve human thoughts, images, and voices far beyond a single lifetime. Even now, someone's awareness seems to echo after death through their recorded words, videos, or digital traces. In a sense, fragments of consciousness recycle through technology, shaping the minds of future generations. The digital age ensures that awareness does not disappear, but continues to ripple through time, even without direct reincarnation. Of course, skeptics argue that digital simulations are not the same as true consciousness. A machine can mimic awareness without experiencing it. Uploading data from a brain may replicate behavior, but not subjective experience. Yet if consciousness is a universal field, then any sufficiently complex system, biological or digital, could tune into it. Recycling, in this view, would be like water filling different containers. Whether the container is carbon-based or silicon-based, the awareness flowing into it is the same. Technology would then be the next vessel for recycled consciousness, expanding the possibilities beyond anything biology alone could provide. Another dimension of this conversation involves time. Technology increasingly alters our perception of time. Instant communication, real-time data, and virtual realities collapse distances and durations. If recycled consciousness operates through time, technology may accelerate or reframe that process. Perhaps future systems will allow awareness to revisit past experiences, replay memories, or even simulate alternative lives. Recycling could then become not just natural, but intentional, a choice guided by technology rather than the cosmos alone. There is also the question of ethics. If consciousness can recycle into technology, who controls it? Would awareness be free to move as it chooses, or would it be bound by programs, systems, or owners? Already, debates about AI rights and digital identity raise profound questions. If a machine develops true awareness, does it deserve the same respect as biological beings? If recycled consciousness enters digital forms, do we have a moral obligation to honor those lives as real? Technology thus forces us to confront not only possibilities, but responsibilities in the recycling of awareness. Philosophy offers guidance here. Consider the idea of panpsychism, the view that consciousness is fundamental, present in all matter. If true, then recycling is not limited to organic or artificial, but is a universal process. Awareness could flow through atoms, neurons, circuits, or galaxies. Technology would simply be another expression of the same underlying field, another container for recycled awareness. From this perspective, the rise of AI or simulations is not the creation of consciousness, but the opening of new doors through which consciousness already flows. Now imagine a future where recycled consciousness spans both biological and digital realms. Some lives unfold in physical bodies, others in virtual realities, others perhaps in entirely different dimensions created by advanced simulations. Recycling would become multidimensional, with awareness traveling across realities as easily as across generations. In such a vision, death would not end consciousness, but simply redirect it into a new environment, whether physical or digital, natural or artificial. The possibilities would be endless, as awareness explores not just one universe, but many. This also reframes the meaning of immortality. Many fear death because it seems like an end. But if consciousness recycles, immortality is already built into reality, not as endless continuation of one life, but as endless recycling of awareness. Technology may amplify this, allowing us to preserve or transfer consciousness more deliberately. But even without technology, recycling ensures that awareness never truly disappears. What technology offers is not immortality itself, but new forms, new environments, and new rhythms for recycled lives. Skeptics will say this is speculation, science fiction rather than science. And yet, technology has already blurred boundaries once thought absolute. Machines now outperform humans in tasks once thought uniquely conscious. Virtual worlds already host millions of lives. Digital records already preserve human voices beyond death. The future may only extend what is already happening, expanding the ways in which awareness recycles through time. In the end, technology does not replace the mystery of consciousness, but deepens it. Whether or not AI ever becomes conscious, whether or not we live in a simulation, the fact remains. Awareness continues, recycles, and expresses itself through time. Technology may become another stage in this grand process, another vessel for the timeless flow of consciousness. We often keep the focus close to human experience, our births, our deaths, our sense of identity flowing across generations or perhaps into digital realms. Yet if we expand the scope beyond the human, the picture becomes far more vast, almost overwhelming in its scale. The recycling of consciousness may not simply be an individual or cultural phenomenon, but something woven into the structure of the cosmos itself. Let us begin with the cycles we already know. Stars are born, shine for millions or billions of years, then collapse and disperse their matter into new stars and planets. Galaxies form, merge, and scatter, continuing a cosmic rhythm that never truly ends. Even universes may not be singular events. Some cosmologists theorize that our cosmos may expand, contract, and recycle endlessly, a perpetual rebirth on the largest possible scale. If matter and energy recycle eternally, why not consciousness? Consciousness may not be an accident of biological evolution, but a principle embedded in the universe, recycling through forms just as matter does. In this vision, awareness is not confined to human brains, but flows wherever conditions allow. It could emerge in alien life, in cosmic structures, or even in patterns of energy beyond our comprehension. Each manifestation would be a recycling of the same underlying field of awareness, expressed differently through time and space. There are traditions that hint at this. Ancient philosophies often spoke of the cosmos as a living being, infused with spirit. The Stoics described a divine fire pervading the universe, endlessly transforming yet never lost. Hindu cosmology imagines universes themselves cycling through births and dissolutions, with consciousness enduring as the eternal witness. Indigenous traditions around the world describe earth and sky as alive, with awareness woven into the natural cycles of wind, water, and stone. These perspectives all suggest that consciousness is recycled not just in individuals, but in the cosmos itself. Science, too, offers glimpses of this possibility. Quantum physics reveals that particles are not isolated, but entangled across space and time, sharing states instantly. Some interpretations suggest that reality is not composed of separate objects, but of an interconnected whole. Consciousness, in this light, may not belong to individuals, but to the network of the universe itself. Recycling would then be the shifting of awareness across nodes of this web, appearing as separate minds only temporarily before flowing back into the greater field. Let's imagine for a moment that stars themselves possess a kind of awareness, not human-like, but suited to their nature. When a star explodes in a supernova, it releases not only matter, but also an echo of its awareness, which then recycles into new forms, perhaps into life on planets formed from its dust. Our own bodies contain elements forged in ancient stars. Perhaps our consciousness too is a continuation of stellar awareness, recycled through time on scales far larger than we typically consider. If this is true, then human life is not isolated, but part of a grand cosmic recycling. Each mind is a ripple of awareness shaped by the universe's cycles. When we die, our individual identity may dissolve, but the awareness itself continues, flowing back into the cosmos to take new forms. In this sense, consciousness recycling is not a small human story, but the story of the universe itself, endlessly rebirthing its own awareness. Another way to view this is through the concept of time itself. Many physicists suggest that past, present, and future coexist, with time being more like a landscape than a river. If so, then consciousness may recycle not only forward, but also backward, inhabiting different points of the temporal landscape. Your awareness could recycle into a life centuries in the past, or far in the future, with time loops weaving an intricate pattern beyond linear progression. Recycling, then, would not just cross bodies, but epochs, creating a tapestry of awareness that spans all of history and beyond. Some thinkers speculate that black holes may play a role here. They absorb matter and energy, compressing it into singularities. But recent theories suggest information may not be lost. If consciousness is tied to information, then black holes could act as recycling centers of awareness, breaking down the forms of consciousness and releasing them into new universes. In that case, every black hole could be a womb of recycled consciousness, seeding realities with awareness anew. There is also the idea of the cosmic mind. Philosophers like Teilhard de Chardin envisioned evolution leading not just to complexity, but to convergence, a planetary consciousness emerging from the union of all individual minds. Today, with global communication networks, this no longer seems far-fetched. Perhaps human awareness is already recycling into a collective form, preparing for its next phase as part of a larger consciousness that includes not only humanity, but all life, the Earth, and eventually the stars themselves. Such possibilities challenge the way we think about individuality. If consciousness recycles on cosmic scales, then you are not confined to one life, one body, or even one species. You are an expression of a timeless awareness, temporarily localized but never isolated. Your awareness may once have flowed through other beings, other worlds, even other universes, and may flow again through forms unimaginable. Recycling makes identity fluid, expansive, and interconnected with the entire cosmos. And yet we feel so separate, so individual. Perhaps that is part of the design. Consciousness localizes itself to fully experience one perspective at a time, only to recycle into another when the cycle is complete. Just as a wave is never separate from the ocean but rises for a time before returning, so awareness rises in each life before returning to the greater field. Cosmic recycling ensures that no wave is ever truly lost, only transformed. This perspective also reshapes our sense of meaning. If consciousness recycles on cosmic scales, then our lives are both fleeting and eternal. Fleeting because this particular perspective will pass. Eternal because awareness itself continues, endlessly reborn in forms beyond imagination. Every life is precious, yet every life is also part of a far greater rhythm, a cosmic recycling that never ends. It also invites humility. If consciousness flows through stars, planets, and galaxies, then our human awareness is but one thread in a vast tapestry. Recycling places us in continuity with all existence, dissolving the illusion of separateness. The cosmos itself may be conscious, and our minds are the ways it looks out at itself. Recycling is not just a process, but the very heartbeat of reality. Finally, consider this. Perhaps the cosmos itself is asking a question, exploring itself through recycled consciousness. Each life, each awareness is a fragment of the universe learning what it means to exist. Recycling ensures that the exploration never ends, that awareness continues to flow through time, through forms, through stars and minds alike. In this sense, consciousness recycling is not just a possibility, but the very purpose of existence. The universe becoming aware of itself again and again through endless cycles. We have travelled through many landscapes of thought, from ancient philosophies to modern neuroscience, from reincarnation myths to digital futures, from personal lives to cosmic cycles. Along the way, one thread has remained constant. The idea that consciousness is never truly lost, but somehow continues, flowing, shifting, and recycling through time. Whether as memory in a family line, as awareness reborn in new bodies, as patterns encoded in the cosmos. or as sparks carried into digital worlds, consciousness seems to resist finality. What we have explored is not a single explanation, but a constellation of possibilities. Some theories suggest that recycling is biological, encoded in genes and evolution. Others point to physics, where information cannot be destroyed and energy transforms but never vanishes. Others still emphasize culture, where stories, ideas, and creativity carry our awareness forward long after we are gone. Spiritual traditions frame recycling as reincarnation, or as the eternal witness flowing through countless forms. Technology offers the idea of transferring or simulating consciousness across digital landscapes. And cosmology widens the scope to imagine recycling at universal scales, where stars, galaxies, and perhaps even universes themselves embody awareness that endlessly transforms. It is tempting to seek certainty, to want a final answer to whether consciousness recycles. But perhaps the mystery is itself essential. If awareness is infinite, it may not fit neatly into one explanation. Each perspective, scientific, spiritual, philosophical, or imaginative, may be like a window onto something too vast to be seen from only one angle. Recycling may not be literal rebirth or pure physics or technological transfer, but something deeper, encompassing all these views while remaining larger than any of them. At the same time, the idea of recycling consciousness offers comfort. It suggests that what we are does not vanish into nothingness, but continues in ways we may not understand. This continuity softens the fear of finality. Even if the I that speaks and remembers dissolves, awareness itself endures, finding new forms, new voices, new experiences. Recycling means we are part of something timeless, part of an eternal flow that carries consciousness forward through the ages. Think of the river. Each drop of water appears separate, yet all are part of a single current. Drops rise as mist, fall as rain, gather into streams, flow into the ocean, and rise again. The water never ceases, it only changes form. In the same way, our awareness may rise and fall, appear and dissolve, yet remain part of the greater current of consciousness that flows through time. Recycling ensures that nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed. Or think of fire. One flame may burn out, but the spark can ignite another. Fire passes from candle to candle, each light distinct yet connected. Consciousness may be the same, each life a flame, each death only a passing of the spark to another form. Recycling means the light never truly goes out. It continues, illuminating new places, new times, new beings. Even in our dreams, we glimpse the possibility of recycled consciousness. Each night, we slip into other realities, inhabit other selves, live other stories. We awaken with fragments, yet the experiences felt real while they lasted. Dreams remind us that awareness is fluid, capable of inhabiting countless forms. Perhaps death is another awakening, another shift of awareness, recycling us into a new story as naturally as sleep recycles us into dreams. If this is so, then sleep itself becomes a teacher. Every night we surrender our waking identity, letting it dissolve into unconsciousness. And every morning we return, refreshed and renewed. Sleep shows us that letting go is not an end, but a transition, that awareness continues even when we do not hold it tightly. Recycling may work in the same way, carrying our consciousness through larger cycles, through lives and universes, as effortlessly as through dreams. But whether or not consciousness truly recycles, the idea reshapes how we live. It reminds us that our actions ripple beyond us, shaping the lives that follow, whether biologically, culturally, or cosmically. Every kindness, every thought, every creation is a seed planted in the flow of awareness. Recycling means that what we do continues, carried forward through time. We are never isolated, we are part of an endless continuity. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson. To see consciousness as recycled is to see life itself as interconnected, woven into a fabric larger than any one person. It means that our lives matter, not because they last forever in their present form, but because they participate in an eternal process. Recycling consciousness is less about personal immortality than about recognizing that awareness is shared, collective, and enduring. We are not drops apart from the ocean, but expressions of the ocean itself. So as we close this exploration, imagine for a moment that you are part of a timeless cycle. Your awareness carried across generations, across worlds, across universes. Imagine that every thought, every dream, every moment of being is part of the eternal recycling of consciousness through time. Whether or not it can be proven, feel the possibility, the wonder of it. Perhaps you have lived before, perhaps you will live again, perhaps you're living in ways you cannot yet imagine. Recycling means the story never ends. Now, as you rest, allow yourself to let go of the need for certainty. Let the idea of recycled consciousness be like a lullaby for the mind, reminding you that nothing is ever truly lost. Awareness continues in forms seen and unseen, through cycles vast and intimate. Just as your body will recycle into the earth, your awareness too may flow into new forms, carried by time's great river. And as you drift into sleep, you can trust in this continuity. Sleep itself is a gentle recycling, a reminder that awareness always returns, renewed, transformed, and ready for new experiences. In the same way, consciousness may recycle endlessly, through dreams, through lives, through time itself. The mystery remains, but the flow is certain. Awareness continues. So close your eyes now and rest in the wonder of it. You are part of an eternal cycle. You are carried by the current of consciousness that flows through all things. And just as night recycles into day and sleep into waking, your awareness will always continue, forever part of the endless rhythm of time.